You've lived a great life and done well for yourself. But what mark will you leave on the world? How will you inspire future generations? Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand have helped thousands of people answer exactly those questions. If you've ever wondered, what will be my legacy? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Stan and Katie Beth.
Welcome back to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. Our guest today is William Tate. William is the co-founder of Freedom Philanthropy Coaching, where he teaches life coaches to earn high six figures by helping just 5 millionaire philanthropists without pitching or selling. A former Army Green Beret and Morgan Stanley leader, William draws from over 30 years of global service to help coaches build joyful, purpose-driven careers rooted in legacy and true freedom. William is joining us today from Uzhhorod. Welcome, William. We are excited to have you with us.
Thank you much, Ukraine. It's the Western Edge, and we're happy to be here.
And I would like full points, everyone, that I pronounced Uzhhorod relatively correctly. Right, William?
You did. You get
Nailed
points
it.
for that.
Straight out of the gate.
No Arkansas accent on that. It's just great.
That's right. So to back up, tell our listeners a little bit about your background. The topic kind of today's conversation is Ukraine, but I would love it if you would take just a few minutes and tell our listeners a little bit about your backstory and why you have a heart for Ukraine.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that, Katie Beth. I'm a political and military historian. I mean, I kind of grew up this, and other kids were geeking out on sports and whatever it is. I geeked out on maps, military, political history, leaders, the biographies, all this thing. So I joined the Army at 17, and my parents let me. I wanted to be all I can be early on. By 19, I'd been to parachute school, and 20, I was commissioned as a lieutenant on the old program at Ole Miss ROTC. But because of that, I was recruited in the local Green Beret unit, and I spent the next couple of years doing Green Beret training all over the place. And because I wanted to be in Special Forces, not for the sort of stuff that you see on Hollywood, the direct action mission stuff, I wanted to be on the Peace Corps side of it. So that's where you get to train and advise. You get to be a force multiplier wherever you are. So fast forward, I did missions in Africa, Central America, Middle East, 2 Gulf War tours. Yeah. And so after 18 years and essentially, 40 countries of helping people, leaving the place better than we found it, I always kept an eye on Eastern Europe because I knew at some point, because I was a Reagan guy, that Reagan, tear down this wall, we were going to win. We were going to win because the Soviet Union, and God bless my family, who grew up under Soviet times, it all collapsed in on itself because of corruption, incompetence, all the stuff that Russia's suffering right now. So, history sort of repeats itself. So we're hoping that's, because they miscalculated and invaded Ukraine, they're literally smashing their army on the Ukrainian defenders, and they're draining their economy to do that. Then we're hoping that it's the first domino that falls. But to answer your question, I just got interested in Ukraine because when I saw the Orange Revolution on TV back in CNN in 2004, I was in Silicon Valley, and I saw these young people out there with their orange banners, Yushchenko. They were trying to keep Yushchenko, the Ukrainian Western guy, Viktor, against the Viktor Yanukovych, the Putin's puppet from the East, who would try to steal the election. So you had all these young people out there, and it got on my radar. So the summer of 05, exactly 20 years ago, I just did a tour. I came here, spent 2 months, I went all over the place. It changed my life. So I decided to go back to Silicon Valley, shake hands with my partners, say, look, I need to fulfill on my spiritual mission. And God has called me to go to Ukraine and help start up the community, sort of the Silicon Valley way, but mainly to help the orphans there. The orphanages in Ukraine are calling me because as part of the tour, we would go and see the orphanages. Great kids, beautiful place. But my fear was, like a lot of places, a lot of developing countries, once they get out of this government control, they're on their own. I mean, we got problems in the U.S. with foster kids and orphanages there about, the government support, but U.S., a lot more resources. Ukraine, developing country 20 years ago, And with Putin making so many more orphans right now, they're still struggling and they got new problems. But, a long story short, that's how I got to Ukraine. I literally saw the need, it aligned with my spiritual mission. So I was able to transition business, turn it over to my partners there, and move to Ukraine to start a new life. And that's what I've been doing ever since. The next year, I went to the middle of the country from Kyiv. I spent my first year. And the next year, I went to the middle, Kremenitsky, and I met my interpreter who became and my guide who became my girlfriend, my wife, and now the mother of our 8-year-old. And our 8-year-old Andrew is in the next room sleeping, I hope, right now. So we're in Uzhhorod, Ukraine, right on the western edge. Out this window here is the Carpathian Mountains. It's Uzhhorod on this side, the mountain there, and Slovakia is on the other side. So I'm about 8 miles from the Slovakian border.
That's incredible. Stan, I know you have tons and tons of questions, so I will let you go first.
So, I've spent a very, very small amount of time in Ukraine, but nothing compared to the amount of time and energy and bandwidth you've given to it. I've certainly become, I would say hooked. Just the connection I've made with random Ukrainians expressing their gratitude to Americans for the support they see us giving has been just unbelievably gratifying. I've also seen I've also been to Bucha, where I've seen the ditch that the Russians threw the bodies of the old women and children that they killed because they ran out of food and didn't have a good game plan for that. So they just went door to door and killed people and took the food out of the refrigerators and then took the bodies down and threw them in a ditch. I'm hoping that someday there will be a war crimes trial to deal with that. But one of the things that has been just unbelievably heartbreaking about this war, and maybe this has happened other times in history and I've not been aware of it, but there's been a systematic pattern of having the Russians take children away from Ukrainian families and take them back to Russia. And I know you're aware of that. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts about that and also get your sense about whether you think there's any possibility that we're ever going to be able to reunite those kids with their Ukrainian family.
Well, number one, bless your heart, Stan. I know that your body, mind, spirit is in the right place. Standing with Ukraine shoulder to shoulder, like so many of us are, the ones that are paying attention. And I can't imagine my 8-year-old being a normal Ukrainian family, and we get invaded, and the jackbooted Russian thugs come to the door and say, well, you're going to be Russian, or there's going to be a problem. And by the way, we're going to re-educate your kid, and we're going to have to do that in a different part of the country. And by the way, he doesn't need your Ukrainian document. He'll be a Russian child. And so off he goes. And so that's happened 40, 50,000 times over the last 3.5 years. Everywhere they go, they just bring destruction. So I don't know how those children are being tracked. I know that there were some from Stanford and other places that were looking into tracking this, not only to try and get the children back, to identify where they are and as much identifying information as it can. I think some of that has been cut because of budget cuts and all that. So I can't tell you a lot about it, but I know it's an ongoing problem. And let me give a little bit of history on that for our listeners. Wherever the Russians have gone the last 300 years or so, when they've gone out from Moscow and conquered, because Russia's not a normal country, it's a federation. So literally from Moscow area, it goes out and it conquers this open vast land to create this buffer zones between, the Muscovites, that's what they're called, literally Muscovites, and the other center is St. Petersburg, the former Leningrad, right? So when they do that, they'll deport the people to wherever it is. They'll put them into labor camps in Siberia or somewhere, gulags. We've heard about gulags. They're back. And so what they're doing is in Donbass, in Crimea, is they're Russifying it, whereas literally they take families out that have escaped to free Ukraine as opposed to Russian-occupied Ukraine, and they'll bring in everybody from anywhere that is Russian. So if you've got a tough life in Siberia, they'll say, here's some money, here's an opportunity. You come and be a teacher, a firefighter, a policeman, soldier, whatever. here's a house for you. It's empty. The family left. I don't know. Apparently they didn't want to be Russian. You can have this house. You can have their house. You're Russian. Russify it. Become Russian. Same thing in Donbass. So they're recruiting right now teachers to teach Russian in their own special language, history, everything, to say, this is always Russia. It's all this brainwashing. So my point is to circle back. Those poor children that have been kidnapped and taken away, the ones that are older can resist some of that. But the new ones, you know how young children are, like my son who's 8. When the war started, he was 5. And even in Durham, North Carolina, when he was talking to his buddies on video, the ones he played with from Alexandria, Ukraine, in the middle of the city, or the middle of the country where my wife and mother-in-law are, he was terrified because he thought his 5-year-old, he thought the Russians were going to attack us in Durham because they were in shelters. They were down there, sirens going off, and they were scared. The whole thing. So children were like this. So we got him some counseling. He's better now. And he's here. He's here because it's safe. But my point is, those children who were old enough to be malleable, unfortunately, my fear is they've been Russified. They've been, their mind has been broken open and poured all this Russian propaganda and junk into it. And we hope we get them back. We hope we can reunite them, but the emotional, mental, spiritual damage that the Russians have done, I hope that can be somehow, and we get the kids back. So that's the main thing. So I hope that answers your question. I don't have any direct experience with it other than I've worked with Ukrainian orphanages. So thank God the children are here and not over there. So
yeah, I want to explore. Yes, I'm aware that you've been working with these orphanages, and we want to hear a lot more about that. So, yeah, the kids being stolen is really just an incredibly sad story. And as a parent, and I know there are a lot of people listening to this podcast who are also parents who just simply could not imagine the thought of having Russian soldiers steal their kids and take them away. But that's happened. What are we saying? 40, 50 plus thousand times now. And,
yes.
and I talked to somebody who told me that they thought that they were being tracked, but you're telling me now you think that maybe the funding's been cut off for that, and we're now not tracking the ones that have been stolen and taken off to Russia recently. So
the new
anyway,
ones,
there's that. But then talk to us about the orphanages. What's your involvement in these orphanages, and shed some light on that.
20 years ago, when I came here and we would visit the orphanages, I saw those kids and I talked to the administrator, and unfortunately, I kind of sensed what was next. They were cocooned. The thing about Ukrainian orphanages is they're not in the cities. They're kind of out a bit. And there's 2 types. There's the sure enough orphanage where the parents there's some problem. They've died. They have some kind of substance use problem. They're prison, whatever it is, and they can't manage the children. So literally they turn over the documents and say that she is a ward of the state. And I hope that someone from somewhere else in a better part of the world will adopt them, or somewhere else in Ukraine or Europe or US or someplace, and provide a better life for them. That's it. So be it infant to toddler to little kids all the way up to 17, which is sort of the age where it's not 18 like in US, it's 17, because that's generally when you graduate high school and you're out. So that's a traditional orphanage. The other one is called an internat. Now, an internat, think of it like a boarding school. They are in the cities. I've seen them in small cities and big cities. The internat is a boarding school for parents who maybe one or both parents are just struggling with life. They're struggling with either financial, substance abuse, some kind of situation, or maybe it's the 5th or 6th kid and they just can't afford them. So literally they don't turn over the documents. They'll say, I need for my son or daughter to go to the boarding school, and they'll be there during the week. And then they can stay over the weekend or they can come home for the weekend. But the state sort of sponsors the school like it would an orphanage. It's a transition type thing. So they've got some family support, but there's some problem. Maybe one or both parents, is struggling in all kind of ways. So and they're not present, or they just can't do it financially. So they have this place for them. So we're glad that the internat is an alternative to traditional like schools, and then you have the orphanage. But what I did years ago was I decided, based on all the places I've been in Ukraine, was I wanted to make sure that these orphans, and we only sponsored 8 at the time. This is literally 20 years ago, where we wanted to teach them life skills. And life skill, in my mind, is English. If you can speak English, you can communicate with the internet, the world, you become more valuable in the marketplace. And we all know about that. We're all in business. So you got to add value to attract folks. So it didn't matter whether the little boys or little girls wanted to go into STEM, tech, like hair, makeup, massage, whatever it is, they needed to learn a life skill, and I needed for them to learn English. So I sponsored English teachers to come there. And then it was like a internship. Whereas when they got to be 15, 16, they would go to the factory, to the plant, to the hairstylist place or wherever it was, and they would be practicing that skill during the summer. So they would take that bus, that little bus. You've been here many times. You know about the little bus called a marshutka. It's a little mini bus. It seats 20, 25. And so it'd go to the village or go to where the orphanage is, it'd pick them up, and they would, bring them back at night. So it was natural for them when they left to just go and work for this place that they already had a relationship with. It was sort of the intern program, just like we did 100 years ago in the US and Europe and other places. So all I did was reestablish that for them. And now, 20 years later, the cool thing is the ones that have graduated and gone on and either in Ukraine or Poland or Germany or wherever else in the world and got resources and remember that, they go back and sponsor. So it's perpetual. It's a flywheel that keeps going. And I'm not even involved. I was just involved the first 3 or 4 years. So I'm super proud of that legacy, the one that you talk about, the living, loving legacy. So that's mine here in Ukraine. I just planted the seed and the trees grew all over the place.
So do you still have any connection? You go visit? Are you involved in it? Are you playing a role in giving voice to the mission, recruiting, raising funds, any of that for them now?
Not now. And I'll tell you why. 3.5 years ago, when everything, when it hit the fan, most of the staff and the kids left for Poland. And so it's new. Many of them have come back, but a lot of them have just stayed. The thing about Ukraine is, men under 60 must stay unless there's a compelling reason for them to leave the border. But women and children literally can go any other place that they get support. So Germany, Poland, other parts of Europe have been. I was just in Slovakia 2 weeks ago. Saw a ton of Ukrainians just across the border in Košice and also in Krakow, Poland, in southern Poland. It was like a little Ukrainian reunion wherever I went. Mostly women, a few guys. I don't know how they got out, didn't ask questions, but it was mostly women that were there. So that's been the situation with the orphanages 3.5 years ago, the staff and other places. One orphanage we've left, and my partner, Markham Davis, he's an American. He's in Texas, I think. We stay in touch. But his orphanage that we sort of sponsor together is in the south of Ukraine in a place called Mykolaiv, Russian Nikolaev, Ukrainian Mykolaiv. And it's close to Kherson. There's only about maybe 40 miles difference between the two. And if you remember the war early on, Kherson was captured by the Russians. Right. Ukrainians retook it, but occasionally shells and drones and others, they attack Mykolaiv. The thing about the orphanage in Mykolaiv, the kids there were special needs. The staff didn't want to leave because the kid would be very disruptive for the kids. These other kids, kids are very malleable. Andrew's very malleable. He speaks 3 languages, been to 3 continents, but he's squared away. These special needs children, God bless them, right? It would be, in many ways, more disruptive for them to take them out of this orphanage in Mykolaiv that they've always all known, and for new staff. So they stayed on, even though they were getting shelled early on, the first 6-8 months of the war. But that's still there. So we still have that orphanage. There's not a lot that I could do for them in terms of life skills, learning English, learning, these other things. So we just hope that, with funding and other resources, it's called abundanceinternational.org, abundanceinternational.org. I can send you the link. You can see some of Mark's work there, pictures of him. I'm kind of the, behind the scenes guy, but that's the one orphanage that we have that we still have contact with in Mykolaiv, again, because it's special needs. So to answer your question, yeah.
So if people are listening to this and want to play a role, participate somehow, would that be the proper?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, You can put it in the show notes, abundanceinternational.org. And I don't know how often Mark updates it, but he told me early on when 3.5 years ago, when the war early started, there was a ton of attention and some resources that were there. But there's a lot of things, people kind of move on. So the need is still there. So if you feel compelled, come to Ukraine, come to where we are. I'll show you around. And when we win and we push the Russians out, I'll give you a whole tour of Ukraine. So there you go.
I suspected most people, when they hear you extend that invitation, are going to respond exactly the same way my wife responded when I told her I was going to Ukraine. And she, I think I would say she panicked. She then, after panicking, she arranged for a going away party for me, a going away party, and she had, I think, 40 of the neighbors that came over the night before I left. I had, I think, 7 prayer groups that had specifically, put my name on the list to pray for me while I was gone. And of course, you know, I did come back. I was not killed. I've done it twice since then. I have been in Kiev on one occasion in particular, whenever I did actually see these Iranian-made rockets, sent into the Shahibs coming in, yeah, like at 4 o'clock in the morning, seeing these rockets come in and seeing fires off in the distance. I had that app on my phone also that would go off anytime there was even the possibility that there would be an attack. But as we've talked about before, the app is really effective and it's designed so that if there's even a possibility of an attack, the app goes off. The result is it goes off about 20 times a day, and everybody ignores it, because if you actually stopped what you're doing every time the app went off, that's all you do all day. And so
All
most
day.
most of the residents in Kiev have now they just kind of ignore it. Although more recently, I think there are people spending more time down in the subway. There are the subways in Kiev. Some of the subway stations are, 300 feet beneath the surface. They were built actually
Mm-hmm.
to be nuclear bomb shelters.
Yep.
If you're down in the subway, whenever there's a Russian rocket attack, you're actually, while you're down there, you are safe. And so they're spending a lot more time down there now, particularly after the defensive weapons supply is being diminished. They don't have the capacity now to shoot down as many of the rockets as they had once upon a time. And so I've had that experience. But my hunch is that not a lot of people are going to take you up on the invitation to come visit while the war is on. But I will say that in my time in Ukraine, and I would say just in particular, spending time in Kiev, Kiev is a place that when I visited there, my reaction was, gosh, I would love to come back here and bring my family when the war is over, because in many ways it's really quite charming. I've been to restaurants, the food is terrific. There's an interesting culture there. It's a place that had never been on my map. It had never been a place I'd even considered traveling to. But gosh, it's actually quite interesting. I've driven through Lviv, but only at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, so I've not really seen it. Everybody I've talked to who's been to Lviv thinks that's like a vacation destination. I've never been down to the Carpathian Mountains, where they have all these charming little hot springs villages where you can go get, you sit in the hot springs, get, do bathing, massaging, all that. So Ukraine actually is a place that at some point we hope will become a destination. But my hunch is you're not going to have a lot of people take you up on the invitation to come visit until we figure out how to get this war over.
Yeah, that's a good point. My wife often reminds me, says, look, not everybody was a Green Beret before like you, so
Right.
your mindset's a little bit different. I am not like you, Stan. I mean, we know that we have a high place on God's, when our time is up, because we served God here, we will be in a higher spot there. But it's unconscionable for me or my wife to take our 8-year-old son to a place where, the Russians are killing people every day.
Right.
So my wife has the same app as you do, and as the crow flies, Kyiv is here, Dnieper is here, the Dnieper River goes like this, and we're right in here. So we're kind of in the Kansas City equivalent in US, really right in the agriculture. And stuff flies over her home. She and her mom are in a 2-story of a 5-story walk up. And that alarm goes off day and night. often like 2 years ago when she was there back in November, she said, because a scud went over the house, it was so loud, it was like a freight train. It rattled her out of the bed at 3 a.m. Distinctly, she jumped on the floor, duck and covered, and it just, like the windows were about to break out, but it didn't. So that kind of stuff goes on occasionally. It depends on the trajectory of how the Russians are firing stuff. But she says right now, she and her friends are so used to the app and the sirens and all this. 3 a.m, if anybody gets any rest, they'll just rub their eyes, saying an expletive about the Russians, and turn over and try and go back to sleep. Because otherwise, it will make yourself crazy trying to deal with the alarms and the stuff going on. Now, it would be unconscionable for the Ukrainian government not to alert certain cities if you want to take action. If you want to go to the shelter in your building or wherever it is, or the subway, then that's your option. We're giving you the alert of where stuff is coming in. And people are paying attention, especially in Kyiv and Kharkiv and other places that get shelled and rocketed all the time. So yeah, it's a mess. And as we both know, Putin has only upped his attacks since they started this peace talks months ago.
Right.
So
Right.
it's really the devil speaking. So it's just awful.
Well, we're at an interesting place. We're recording this in early July of 2025. I keep thinking that at some point soon, there'll be some turning point in this and we'll see an end to it. But I thought that 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, and I was wrong about it then. I've been wrong about it every month. So at this point, I really don't know. I don't know where this goes. One thing that has surprised me is how effective the Ukrainians seem to have been in mounting their own defense with more limited resources brought in from outside the country. They've been quite innovative in developing their own drones that have been just remarkably effective in attacking Russian tanks and even attacking Russia out beyond the borders of Ukraine. So Ukrainians have been far more resourceful and innovative than anybody thought they would be. And so they seem to be able to continue the fight, but it's really hard to have a sense about how long can they hold out against an enemy that clearly has them outnumbered in terms of certainly population and probably all kinds of other resources. I don't know what, I have no sense of that. I don't know if I know you're out in Western Ukraine and you don't have any secret intel either, but do you have a take on that?
Stan, thank you. I am literally a boot on the ground. And here's what I observe from Uzhhorod. These are most determined people that in my whole military career, going all over the place, I've ever met. Every time I see a soldier on the street, or if I take a cab ride somewhere, I end it with Slava Ukraini. They reply with Heroyam Slava, Slava Ukraini, God bless Ukraine. Heroes never die. We're going to honor our heroes. These people are not going to fight. I mean, they're not going to, they're always going to fight. They're not going to quit. They're in it to win it. The military hospital here is a recovery hospital. I see these soldiers in wheelchairs and on crutches, and they're missing parts and all over. 2 days ago, I was on the street of Uzhhorod. I saw what looked like a late 20s guy in a wheelchair, and his baby was here in his arms, and his wife was sort of pushing him, and he still had a bag and a tube, and he was missing his right leg. And I went over to him and I said, the people of the United States of America are with you. We support you. We stand with you, regardless of our politics. We're with you. The people are. And he, in his broken English, he said, thank you. I was glad to hear that. But it's their fight. They recognize it. They've been in it for 3 years doing the heavy lifting. I'm a big fan of General Ben Hodges, a 3-star. He retired. He was the NATO commander. I think he retired in 2019 or so. And he says it's, even though the Ukrainian military has been training in the NATO countries, we got it backwards. We need to learn from them. The most qualified military in the world right now is the Ukrainian military, because literally they've had to be. We can learn from them, not the other way around. The shoe's on the other foot now. The other thing I've noticed in every city that my wife has been to now, because she's in the middle of the country, she took the train, it was 18 hours. She went through Lviv, she went through the mountains. It was a beautiful place. These Transcarpathian and Carpathian mountains are the secret untouched, beautiful geographic land, the Eastern Alps, I call them, and it's all natural. So the food, the resources, the people, everything is great. But I'll tell you, every city has got their wall of honor where they have Ukrainian soldiers from either provided from their official military photos or the families provided the photos in their city. And just the one that I stopped by last week, downtown, close to the Uzhhorod River, I counted 44 folks from this area died. This doesn't include the wounded, the folks. These are the ones who died as a result of combat. So I saw a few from 2014, 16, 17, 18, and then, of course, a bunch of them, 22, 23, 24, and a few from 2025 from this area. My point is, every city, my wife took a picture, a video just a few days ago of the one in Alexandria, Ukraine, and it had 40 fallen soldiers. Same sort of scenario. People will go out there, their family, their tribe, they'll lay fresh flowers, they'll put candles, they'll sort of maintain and make sure that the honor wall is clean and still maintained, even if it's like a heavy wind or something like that, they'll come back out and fix it up. So I know these folks are committed. There's no protest here at all. There's just 100% support. In fact, the biggest protest that I saw just went on Sunday was exactly what we were talking about, is bring our children back. Bring our children back. And this was aimed at the people in Washington, D.C., to say, please restore the interest, the funding, the whatever it is, so we can track where our children are. We're doing the fighting, just help us with the tracking. So, I mean, that's, to me, that is money well spent to protect these people. It's in our best interest. And I tell them, my GOP friends that we've had for years, America first and America strong is Ukraine strong. We're liberating U.S., actually saving money and time and boots on the ground by killing the Russian military in Ukraine. Ukrainians are only asked for stuff to do it with. No American troops, just the intel and the stuff to do it with. And I think it's a win-win for both of us. So God bless you and your team for continuing that line of thinking.
Well, sure appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your courage to be there, report to us from inside the country. It's pretty helpful to see that, get that insight for sure. Katie?
William, we really appreciate the fact that you are joining us from the middle of the night where you are. And so we appreciate you making the time to jump on and just kind of give us kind of from the forefront everything that you've experienced and seen, your passion for Ukraine and the people and these children. And for our listeners, we really want to thank you for joining us. This has been the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. Our guest today again was William Tate, and to get connected with William, you can find him on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and you can also learn more at abundanceinternational.org. We will add all of those things for you in the show notes to make it easy. And William, we are sending you our thoughts and prayers as you continue your stay in Uzhhorod tonight.
Thank you so much. So Andrew is going to graduate. He graduated third grade, and he'll be a fourth grader in Durham, North Carolina. So my wife says, we got to get him back the first week in September so he can participate in his fourth grade class, which he's all excited about. So otherwise we would extend. We would just keep on keeping on here, because this is, when you find your tribe and your place and it's sort of, you're at peace with it, then you know it. And we have this, irregardless of the war situation, we're just glad to be here. So thanks for the opportunity for me to be able to tell my story about Ukraine and why Ukraine is important, why their legacy is important here, and why we're doing what we're doing here, regardless of the children.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To find out more about Stan and Katie Beth, go to pinnaclelegacylaw.com. You can also find links in the show notes.